again. I'm focused on ensuring that the full resources of the Secret Service are utilized to safeguard our protectees, and I've implemented and will continue to implement changes to ensure that that happens. We are and we will continue to cooperate with pending oversight investigations of the July 13th failure being done now by Congress, the Department of Homeland Security's Office of the Inspector General, and the independent review directed by President Biden. Additionally, the Secret Service's Office of Professional Responsibility is currently conducting a mission assurance review. As I stated, I am not waiting for the completion of those reports, and I've directed the Secret Service to take immediate steps to ensure our protectees are indeed safe. And I will summarize those steps in a moment. I am committed to pursuing accountability for the Secret Service's failure in Butler, Pennsylvania. But let me be clear. If policy violations by Secret Service personnel are identified by the agency's mission assurance review, those individuals will be held accountable. And they will be held accountable to our fair and thorough disciplinary process. The first part of that process is an investigation to identify whether policy violations occurred. Potential policy violations are referred to our Office of Integrity, and appropriate discipline is administered under our table of penalties. The facts will drive the outcomes of those investigations, and I promise accountability. And I will not rush to judgment nor ignore due process. Every single person within the Secret Service feels the weight of what happened. We are in an unprecedented threat environment and a high operational tempo during this presidential campaign. The men and women of the Secret Service are working incredibly hard and doing their jobs under difficult circumstances. They need to focus on their work, and they need to know that I have their backs, and that is my commitment to them. I want to thank our state and local partners. The Secret Service relies on local law enforcement for every protective event. Those valiant men and women work tirelessly protecting their communities. They know the people, places, and terrain that we operate in. We owe them our thanks, and simply put, we cannot do our jobs without them. And I know how important this relationship is. I spent 4 years in local law enforcement before joining the Secret Service. I know the long hours these men and women put in and the professionalism they bring to this partnership. And in that capacity, I was always proud to support the Secret Service's protective mission when called upon as a municipal police officer. In no way should any state or local agency supporting us in Butler on July 13th be held responsible for a Secret Service failure. Typically, the Secret Service refrains from commenting on ongoing investigations, but we know these are extraordinary circumstances. So please understand that the information provided today is based on what I know now to a degree of certainty. We will learn more as interviews are completed and further evidence is gathered and analyzed, and I will share more information as it becomes available. But I can say without a doubt that heroism was present that day. Secret Service agents rushed to the stage to shield the former president with their bodies within 3 seconds of bullets ringing out in an unflinching act of bravery. The Secret Service counter-sniper who neutralized the threat with a single shot undoubtedly saved countless lives. We're in a high operational tempo, and I need and I want our Secret Service workforce, the dedicated men and women of the Secret Service. I want to know and I want to make sure that they are uplifted so they can focus on carrying out the mission. They are worthy of trust and confidence, and they deserve your support. And let me take a moment to speak to the American people that are counting on us to do our job, to protect their ability to cast a vote for the candidate of their choice. The Secret Service's successes are largely unknown. You will only know of our failures, and those have been documented, and all of them are undeniably dark days in our nation's history. But let me tell you about the dedicated patriots of the Secret Service. These public servants are the quiet professionals working in the background, day in and day out. They are standing the watch, providing a blanket of protection to the people that work in the White House, to the thousands of people who attend political rallies and nominating conventions, to the thousands of American citizens who line Pennsylvania Avenue every 4 years on Inauguration Day to see the new president and the new vice president. And they are out there right now doing this mission. They are focused, and they live their professional lives committed to the values of this agency: justice, duty, loyalty, courage, and honesty. This is who we are, and this is what we do, and we will earn back your trust. I'll now provide a timeline of the visit to Butler, Pennsylvania. On July 8th, personnel assigned to the agency's Pittsburgh field office conducted planning meetings and a site walkthrough with law enforcement partners and campaign staff. On July 10th, Secret Service counter sniper and technical security personnel arrived in Pittsburgh and began advanced planning for their teams. July 12th, the build-out of the campaign rally site began and continued through the early morning hours of July 13th. In the morning of July 13th, a site briefing was conducted with Secret Service personnel and law enforcement partners supporting the event. Secret Service personnel took their posts, and a technical security sweep of the protective site commenced prior to the site's opening to event staff, vendors, and to the public. At 12:30 p.m., the Secret Service opened the protective site to event staff and vendors, and then at 1 o'clock, magnetometer screening of the estimated 15,000 people attending the campaign rally event, staff, and vendors began. At 5:30 p.m., former President Trump arrived at the campaign rally via Secret Service motorcade, and at that time he met with supporters in a secure backstage area within the protective site. At 5:45 p.m., a local Butler County Emergency Services Unit counter-sniper team member texted the Secret Service counter-sniper team leader about a suspicious person and sent 2 photos of the individual, later identified as the assailant. At 5:53 p.m., the Secret Service counter-sniper team leader texted the Secret Service counter-sniper teams that local law enforcement was looking for a suspicious individual outside of the perimeter lurking around the AGR building. At this time, Secret Service personnel were operating with the knowledge that local law enforcement was working on an issue of a suspicious individual. The concept of local law enforcement working on such issues is common at sites. And on July 13th, there were over 100 calls for support. At 6 p.m., former President Trump took the stage to begin remarks. And based on what I know right now, neither the Secret Service counter-sniper teams nor members of the former president's security detail had any knowledge that there was a man on the roof of the AGR building with a firearm. It is my understanding that personnel were not aware the assailant had a firearm until they heard gunshots. At 6:11 p.m., a member of the former President Trump's protective detail contacted their Pittsburgh field office counterpart to inquire about the radio update that there was an issue local law enforcement was looking into near the perimeter. At 6:11 p.m., the assailant's first volley of 3 shots was fired, and within 3 seconds, the former president's detail rushed the stage and covered former President Trump, shielding him with their own bodies. The 4 through 8 shots took place over the next several seconds. 15.5 seconds after the assailant's first shot, a Secret Service counter-sniper fired a single round that neutralized the assailant. That concludes a quick, brief summary of the timeline. And with that, I'll turn it over to our staff here to begin any questions.
Director, we're going to start with Fox News. David Spons with your question.
Hi, sir. Thank you for doing this. You said earlier this week to Congress that You said earlier this week to Congress that you don't want to tip anything on the scale as far as disciplinary action is concerned. I need to ask you, since you testified, has anyone been suspended with or without pay? Has anyone been fired? And will you tell us as people are disciplined along the way, or is this something we're going to need to just constantly be asking? Or will you update and tell us 5 people have been fired, 6 people, 7 people? What can you tell us?
Sure. Thank you for that question, David. So, as I said in my opening statement, there are going to be there's the mission assurance review. If that mission assurance review is looking into if there were policy violations, at that point now, if in fact there were policy violations, at that point now it'll go into a parallel path of a disciplinary type of investigation. Those are internal investigations that deal with employee matters, so we're not going to be able to provide real-time updates or continuously to provide you updates on that. But what I will tell you is that these are very thorough investigations, and if in fact there were policy violations and they are substantiated, those employees will be held accountable.
I think if I just may, sir, people want accountability. You may not be able to tell us names or positions or something, but will you be able to say that people have been disciplined? People want to hear that there's some accountability here.
I will be able to, at least at a high level, provide at least some type of statement that people are being accountable, being held accountable.
If I may, and I appreciate this, Fox Digital obtained some new video of somebody on the roof, which we believe is the assailant that was running back and forth while President Trump was speaking. What do you make when you see of that? How does that go with this timeline here?
Yeah, so it affirms to me, and again, and you heard this from the FBI, and they're still conducting interviews and looking at this. It even just affirms to me that this was a failure. We should have had better protection for the protectee. We should have had better coverage on that roof line. We should have had at least some other set of eyes from the Secret Service point of view covering that. That building was very close to that outer perimeter, and we should have had more of a presence. And so as far as the timeline of him running back and forth, I know the FBI has provided a bit of a chronology as well, and so I'd have to go back and look at that. But the bottom line is this, David. This was a Secret Service failure. That roof line should have been covered. We should have had better eyes on that.
Thanks, Director. We're going to go to the Washington Post. Carrie Stein, next question.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. I have just a quick follow-up. Can you describe, you said there were 100 calls for support, who those calls came from and what those looked like? And also, moving forward, do you anticipate, and if so, what any different changes in protocol between how Secret Service communicates or works with local law enforcement specifically as they work to secure events or other things?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So with regards to calls for support, it was a very hot day that day. There was a lot of not only EMS type of calls to address people, but there were people that needed some other type of law enforcement assistance. This happens, candidly, happens a lot at outdoor rallies, where especially on hot days. So there was a lot of traffic, radio traffic on the local net about, hey, I need EMT here. So there was a lot of people that were needing assistance. With respect to the interoperability, so one of the things that I've directed is I've commissioned a task force. And that task force is going to be leveraging the resources of the Department of Homeland Security. It'll be co-chaired in all likelihood by someone from the Secret Service and someone from CISA. And I think we're also going to bring in some state and local law enforcement. The interoperability challenge, it's not an easy fix. It's not as simple as just trying to figure out the local frequency of the agency you're working with and then piping that into your radio network. It requires a substantial technical fix. In the meantime, before we can get to that, what I need to have is I need to make sure that our folks, when they're out there, we use a counterpart system. On the day in Butler, we had a Pennsylvania State Trooper in our security room. They also had a unified command post that had some of the other agencies that were on site that day. It is plainly obvious to me that we didn't have access to certain information, not by anybody's fault. It just so happened that there was a sense of urgency, that there might have been radio traffic that we missed. We have to do a better job of that. So moving forward, in addition to this task force that we'll provide more information on next week as we begin to stand that up, I've also directed all of our SACs, our special agents in charge of field offices across the country, to reevaluate where we put our security rooms. If a state or local sets up a unified command post, maybe we need to be in that room as well, as opposed to just being in another room and relying on that counterpart system. It was so apparent to me that in this incident, in the final 30 seconds, which has been the focus of what happened before the assailant opened fire, there was clearly radio transmissions that may have happened on that local radio net that we did not have. And so we have to do a better job of co-locating, leveraging that counterpart system, and this is going to drive our operations going forward. We did not. It did not make it over to us, or whether we did not hear it, it just did not make it over to us. It did not make it to us. And I go back to my opening statement where the members of the detail, they did not, all they knew that the issue, that the locals were working an issue at the president's 3 o'clock, which would have been off to his right, which is where the shot came from.
Thanks, Rick. We're going to go to Rebecca Santana with the Associated Press.
Just to follow quickly on that question of the 100, to clarify on the 100 calls that you got roughly that day, I understand a lot of them were heat related. How many specifically were suspicious people? Was this the only call, the eventual shooter that was a suspicious character? And then also can you clarify, did you guys have a drone on site? Did you try to use it? And if not, why did you not use the locals' offer of a drone?
Sure. So as I understand it now, based on the information I have, there were other calls of suspicious individuals. And your other question was about drones?
About the
Drones.
drones.
Yeah.
You had a drone on site that was a Secret Service drone, and what was the reason you couldn't use it? And then also there was this offer from the locals of somebody having a drone.
Right.
Why was that?
So we did not have a drone on site. We did not put a drone up. Based on the information I have right now, I am aware that there was a request from a local agency to offer to fly a drone on that day. And that is also part of the mission assurance review that I've asked to get some better insight in. One of the other changes that I implemented when I became the acting director is we are now going to leverage the use of unmanned aerial systems at sites now. So we are putting those assets out, and we should have had better line of sight on some of those high ground concerns. We thought we might have had it covered with the human eye. But clearly, we are going to change our approach now, and we are going to leverage technology and put those unmanned aerial systems up.
We're going to go to Nicole Skanda with CBS News.
Thank you so much for doing this. You mentioned that there were text messages from Butler ESU to U.S. Secret Service counter snipers. I'm curious if that is routine. There were 2 communication channels at the Butler rally, and you referenced earlier this week it appears that information was stuck or siloed at the state and local channel. What was the plan to relay information from locals to the Secret Service initially? What is the protocol? And I just have one follow-up.
Sure. So, Nicole, we use that counterpart system, right? And so the teams, especially on the tactical side, when it comes to the tactical, our counter-assault team, they actually had an embed with them from the local TAC team. And they had that radio net as well with Pennsylvania State Police. With respect to the counter snipers, they were using cellular or telephone text communications. At this point, moving forward, what I have directed now is that everybody should be using the radio net. And if we don't have the ability to pipe in or leverage that counterpart system, that's one of the things that we're looking at now. We should be able to have direct comms with the people that are supporting us, and that's moving forward. That's what I have directed.
So just to clarify, U.S. Secret Service counter snipers did not have radio communications.
Not with the local CS folks that were providing a support. They were basically had an area responsibility independent from where our counter snipers were securing.
And just a last thing, did the U.S. Secret Service counter sniper teams that arrived on site on July 10th ever relay line of sight concerns? What came of that? And can you confirm that this was the first 2024 campaign event that counter sniper teams were assigned to the former president?
Sure. As part of their advance, they identified those line of sight, those high ground concerns, and there's a division of labor. With respect to the whether or not this was the first time, it was. It was the first time Secret Service counter snipers were deployed to support the former president's detail.
Go to Eileen Sullivan with the New York Times.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. I have a question about the review that you did, the picture that you showed in the Senate the other day of the vantage point that the local snipers had. How do you know that that's the window that they were actually posted at? Because they're saying that they're on a completely other side of the building. And related to that, has the Secret Service actually interviewed the snipers that were in the AGR building?
So thank you for that. So once the FBI had released the Butler Farm Show site, we were able to take custody of it, and we sent the full resources of our Office of Investigations, which included the Forensic Services Division. We did a full site reconstruction, and this is part of our ongoing mission assurance review. As part of that, that also included the plotting and also trying to identify where not only our personnel were, but also where state and local law enforcement were. And then the second part of your question was?
Well, so, I mean, how did you identify where they were? And have you interviewed the local snipers?
So the mission assurance, we're starting with our federal personnel and working out. We will get, if they're willing to be interviewed, we will ask for the local law enforcement on site to be interviewed that day. How we went back and reconstructed that was based on what we had based on the ops plan, and then also based on what our own folks, as they understood it on the day of.
Well, but I mean, you talked a lot about how you may not have been as specific as you need to be. So how do you know that they were in that window, that if they looked left, they could have seen something? Because they're saying there's no way they couldn't see any of the roofs from where they were posted at the other side.
So I think what we'll do is we'll let the mission assurance play that out, and we'll look forward to interviewing them and definitely getting their side of the story. But what I also want to reiterate is this was a Secret Service failure, and so they should not be blamed. We're not trying to shift blame to anybody, and that's the important takeaway, that we need our state and local partners out there doing this with us every day.
Thanks, Director. We're going to go to Peter Thomas at ABC.
Director, thank you for taking the time. Just a couple questions, if you could walk us through some things to help us better understand. Have you gotten to the bottom of why there was no one stationed on the roof from a law enforcement perspective, and why there was no one there to secure the building to make sure no one could get up there? Have you gotten any clarity on why those two lapses in security were in place? And I have a couple quick follow-ups.
Sure. It's something that, again, having been there the day after I was named the acting director, I wanted to put eyes on and go up there and see it. Yes, and looking at that site, it really, seeing how close that site was to the stage, seeing where it was, it definitely raised a lot of questions in my mind that there should have been physical presence, if not on the roof, that there should have been better security to prevent anyone from getting up on that roof. Moving forward, I've directed our Office of Protective Operations and our Special Operations Division now that when we are up operational and we have counter snipers out there, that we're working with locals, and that they in fact will also be out present. At the very least, the presence of a law enforcement officer can deter a lot of bad activity. Having been a local police officer, I will never know how many crimes I prevented just by being there, just by walking the street and being out there. And so moving forward, one of the things that we want to do is we want to deter people from even thinking about trying to do something like this again. And the only way we can do that is leveraging not only the resources that we have, but the resources of our state and locals, and putting them out there in an overt presence.
Two very quick follow-ups. You talked at length at the hearing the other day about the system that did not operate that could detect drones. Mm-hmm. Can you describe a little bit of how that works? Does that go in the sky itself to detect the drones? And then finally, the interoperability issue. I'm clear in terms of that Secret Service radios were not communicating with the locals. Mm-hmm. But you had people in the command post, right, who in theory could hear and know some basics of what was going on. Is that am I understanding that correctly?
So with respect to the counter UAS, Pierre, I don't want to get into sensitive information. But what I can tell you is it allows that asset allows the geolocation to be able to plot where a drone is within a certain distance of how we set up. So think of it as like geofencing, and then being able to pinpoint and detect where that is. With respect to the agency that was, we had Pennsylvania State Police, but it appears that there was really a big sense of urgency going on, and the state and locals were doing everything they possibly could to try to find the assailant. He had already come to their attention. They were actively trying to find him, and I believe everyone was doing their level best to try to locate him. But there could have been other agencies that were putting out radio transmissions, and this is something that we'll work with the FBI to get further on. But those radio transmissions might have just been back to the Unified Command Post and maybe not have made it over the Pennsylvania State Police here. But that's something that we're going to look into, and definitely something that we are moving forward. We definitely want to remedy this going forward.
But your Secret Service personnel in the command post had some sense that something was going on based on what they were being told about the radio traffic.
Yes, that they were working an issue at the 3 o'clock of the stage.
We'll go to Andrew Goodsworth with Reuters.
Thanks for doing this. I wanted to ask you about changes moving forward. Former President Trump has said he wants to continue having outdoor rallies. What specifically will be different at the next rally that wasn't the case in Butler? And if I could ask a follow-up to, do you have information in the 30 seconds after the gunman was confronted on the roof by a local law enforcement officer that there were local law enforcement trying to communicate with the Secret Service that there was someone on the roof with a gun and that transmission was the one that was missed?
Okay. So with respect to the former president wanting to get back out there, listen, it's a campaign season, right? Candidates want to be out there. They want to be, whether it's an indoor site or an outdoor site, it's on the Secret Service to make sure that we create a secure environment. Listen, we identify challenges, we identify concerns, and then it's on us to figure out what we need to do to mitigate that. So if there are going to be future campaign rallies outside, it's going to be on us to make sure that we are providing all of the assets and resources to make sure that those sites are indeed secure. With respect to the radio transmissions, based on what the FBI, my colleague from the FBI testified the other day, and they are working on isolating some of those radio frequencies from the state and locals, that there was somebody who did in fact radio out that they had seen the individual with a weapon. What I can tell you is that piece of information, that vital piece of information, and by no fault of anyone, it was a very stressful situation. It did not make it over. Our detail, our counter snipers, everyone that was there that day, were operating under the assumption and under the last bit of information they had received that there was an issue that the locals were working at the 3 o'clock. That's the bit of information that we had, not anything about a weapon.
We'll go to Holmes Library with CNN.
I wanted you to address, or if you can, describe the Pittsburgh field office and their level of experience, especially in preparing for events like this, and also have they explained their thinking and how they defined the perimeter that day?
Sure. Thanks, Holmes. Our Pittsburgh field office, I don't think there's anybody in the Secret Service who is feeling this more than the men and women of our Pittsburgh field office. And I've met with them. And they are down right now. And so when I've met with them the other day, it was very difficult. It's difficult for them. They feel like they let their colleagues down. They feel like they let the country down. And they are wearing this, and it's open. You can see it. It's an open wound that they are carrying. They are a very experienced office. And what I will say is they are cooperating with the mission assurance. They understand the gravity of this situation. And they are definitely down right now.
I wonder if I can, one follow-up. You testified about one of the Secret Service failures was an assumption that day. I'm curious
Yeah. So when I said it's a failure to challenge our assumptions, meaning the assumption that, hey, that's going to be addressed or that's going to be covered by state and local. So earlier this week, I convened a call with all of our special agents in charge of all of our field offices, and I expressed to them, listen, we need our state and local counterparts, but we also have to be very direct, very clear about what our expectations are about what we need from them, whether it's a particular asset, whether it's particular numbers of personnel. We need to be very clear so that they have an understanding of exactly what we need from them. That's on us. We need to be better communicators and articulate exactly what we need to mitigate any challenges, concerns, or anything that we identify during that advanced process. And so I have full confidence in our SACs in the field. I have full confidence in our state and local counterparts that moving forward now, we're not going to have this assumption that, oh, we think that they have it. No, we're going to work together. We're going to have good, hard, fierce conversations about what we're going to do, and then we're going to go out there and we're going to make all of these venues secure moving forward.
We'll go to Ryan Barber with the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you, Acting Director. One thing, for starters, I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit on a portion of the timeline in which you address a communication between the Secret Service detail and personnel at the Pittsburgh field office. It just struck me as a little vague, and I was curious if you could elaborate on what that communication was.
So the former president's details, they had an advanced person on the ground who was responsible for the site. The radio transmission goes out about locals working an issue at the 3 o'clock. The member of that detail called their Pittsburgh field office counterpart. Hey, what do you know about this? Right in the middle of that phone conversation, the shots begin firing. So that's the context of it.
And sorry if I missed. Could you say how they became aware of the locals working an issue in the first place to even have that conversation with them?
That was the radio transmission that was put out by our security room.
I got it. Okay. Just to follow up, I'm curious about, you mentioned that this was the first event where Secret Service counter snipers had been assigned as part of the security for former President Trump. To what extent do you think that factored into what were ultimately shown to be the failures? Just that this was a first time, at least in a while, in his capacity as a former president, that they were there on the site.
So
the novelty of it. Sorry.
Sure. So let me just clarify one thing. This is the first time that Secret Service counter snipers, but the former president at campaign rallies has actually been getting state and local resources. So tactical assets, counter snipers from state and locals. So with respect to why they were there in Butler, listen, we evaluate our threat landscape every day. We calibrate based on that threat. We evaluated a threat stream that we have, and we put our Secret Service counter sniper personnel out there. And looking back, it was very fortunate that we did. But the former president will have counter sniper coverage moving forward, as will the president, the vice president, Senator Vance, and then we'll await the eventual Democratic vice presidential nominee. We are going to put full resources out there to make sure that our campaign cadence now is obviously picked up, and we're going to make sure that we have all the resources out there to address any challenges that we have.
We'll go in the front, Julia Ainsley with NBC News.
Thank you. As you're doing this review, are you looking at the days leading up to this event and the instructions that you gave to state and local and federal partners? I know in the past there used to be a PowerPoint presentation that was given before events like this, where people who were part of each unit in the Secret Service would stand up, go through the mission, who was assigned to them, what they'd be doing. I understand that did not happen in this case and hasn't been happening for some time prior. Is that something you think was missing here? Is that something you might review and bring back? And do you also think the Secret Service is too reliant on state, local, and federal partners? I mean, you have almost 2,000 HSI agents helping in events coming this fall. That's a third of their workforce, and it takes a lot from state and locals as well. So first, would you bring back the PowerPoint? Do you think there should have been more planning? And are you too reliant on state and local and other partners?
Thanks, Julia. So that will be part of the mission assurance, the communications and what was communicated leading up to it. What I can tell you now, based on information I have, is there was, and what you're referring to is what we call a police meeting, where we bring all the agencies together that will be directly supporting a particular visit. We know that there was a police meeting. We know that there were agencies from the various jurisdictions were present. The ones, and when I say that, the ones that were the primary ones identified with providing support and were going to be involved in the advanced planning process, meaning they were going to provide a counterpart, kind of like what you said, the PowerPoint. If you're going to be conducting the site, this is Special Agent so-and-so, and here's their contact info. And then usually at the end of that meeting, everyone kind of goes off and they form up and they go over, how they're going to go out and do the walkthroughs and identify some of the things. Based on the information, I don't know about the PowerPoint. I can tell you that there was a police meeting. With respect to the PowerPoint, I certainly think that visuals are always good. I think that if we're not using it, we certainly will. But that goes back to my direction that we have to be very specific about what we're communicating and what our expectations are moving forward. With respect to the reliance on state and local law enforcement, listen, there are 700,000 full-time law enforcement officers, over 700,000 full-time law enforcement officers in the United States. The majority of prosecutions in the criminal justice system in the United States are done by state and locals. That's a result of criminal investigations that they do every day in their communities to keep them safe. Over 135 officers died last year serving their communities, federal, state, and local. 47 of them died by violent means, gunfire. There's not an over-reliance on them. They're out there every day securing their communities. They know the terrain. They know the people. More importantly, they know the local laws. If you're in a state where it's open carry, we're going to rely on them to enforce local laws. I, as a federal agent, cannot go out there and enforce the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I need those state and local law enforcement officers. So I would push back on that. With respect to leveraging other federal partners, when we were in the Department of Treasury and I was a brand new agent, I would stand post during a campaign year with agents from ATF, IRS criminal investigations. We were all one big happy family. Customs. Customs moved over to DHS just like we did. So we do this every 4 years. We rely on those partners. We use them during national special security events like the Democratic National Convention, the United Nations General Assembly, the presidential inauguration. Those are whole of government security operations, which the Secret Service is the lead planning for, and we're going to bring in partners from across the government. I don't feel that it's an over-reliance. It's something that we have done going back to our days at Treasury, and we're going to continue to do that. We need those partners, and we need those state and local officers.
Can I follow up here?
Sure.
There's just something I didn't understand. When you're talking about that time period where locals understand that this person is a threat, but it's before Secret Service finds out, understand communication issues, were they not standing right next to them, or were they in two separate command centers?
So we had our security room, and then they had a unified command post, and we had a Pennsylvania State Police officer representative in our security room.
There was no Secret Service agent in the unified?
No, there was not.
Are there typically two separate command centers?
That was unique. As I understand it, that's an emergency management model that they use. As I mentioned in that conversation with our special agents in charge in the field, I've directed them, hey, we need to rethink where we put our security room. If the large majority of our partners are in a unified command post or in a different location, we need to probably be there too. And so we have to rethink how we, where we put our security rooms, and we are in fact doing that now moving forward.
So let's go to Ellen Gilmer with Bloomberg. We'll do the pool. If there's time for follow-up, we can take it. We got to take through.
Thanks so much. Appropriators in Congress this week delayed consideration of DHS's budget for fiscal 25. They want to know more about what Secret Service needs. I know you said Tuesday, obviously every agency head is always going to say they need more resources, but can you be kind of specific about what resource needs there may be, particularly when we're looking at the technology issues, radio transmissions,
Sure.
the CUAS system?
So following this, we have had tremendous support from the Department of Homeland Security and from the Secretary. And we have, in fact, looked at all of these needs. Given this dynamic, high-threat environment that we're operating in order to meet this, we can meet this now. But it is going to require additional investments and resources, and we are having those conversations. We certainly we've had great support, not only from the department, but also our appropriations committees, and we are working through kind of what our needs are right now. We will have future conversations about this, and we are appreciative that everyone is really coming together to make sure that we have what we need to meet this high threat.
And some senators have started to bring up that whole chestnut of should Secret Service be in DHS. Is that a conversation that you think is productive at this time?
Listen, that's not for me to weigh in on, but what I will tell you is, there's also a lot of discussion about why should the Secret Service do criminal investigations. And what I will say is this. We were founded in 1865 as an investigative entity. It's in our DNA. I firmly believe that the best protection agents learn those skills being criminal investigators. You learn how to interact with people. You learn organizational skills. You learn to be analytical. Those are all traits that you need to have when you're on a detail. Moreover, if you look at where we are today, buildings, communities, everything is interconnected. And so we have a particular expertise in cyber and in cybercrime and critical systems protection. And so when you overlay that investigative skill set that we have, it's more than just securing the president or our protectees in a brick and mortar setting. It's also protecting them from things that make them vulnerable due to cyber. And so the only way to learn those skills, to be able to detect, to be able to analyze, to be able to make sure that we are hardening not only cyber systems, but hardening a building that is fed by cyber systems, the only way to gain that experience, that knowledge, is to be able to do criminal investigations. Additionally, it is within our investigative authority to follow up on threats. People make threats to the president and the people we protect every day. We need to have that domestic and international network of field offices to be able to track down those threats. And if necessary, bring those people to justice and present them to a U.S. Attorney's Office. So I know there's been a lot of talk. Should we or shouldn't we? Should we do this? Should we be in DHS? The bottom line is this. If you want the Secret Service to continue to be the Secret Service and be effective at what it does, it needs to be doing investigations, and it probably needs to be in the Department of Homeland Security until Congress or others have an opportunity to weigh in.
The last questions, we're going to go to the pool for those that couldn't be here today. Jake, yes.
Just a quick question. There's a report that a whistleblower has alleged that you personally directed cuts to the counter-surveillance division, which led to the threat assessments team failing to perform its duties that it typically would before the Butler rally. Is that accurate? Is that allegation accurate?
So I've become aware of this. We got a congressional letter on it. What I can tell you is that the counter-surveillance division, they do a fantastic job. They have a very specific mission set. A lot of that mission set is here in the National Capital Region, focused on permanent protective sites. But they do go out and they support, when requested, they go out and support former details. I know that there's been allegations that I personally cut or that I denied requests. The counter-surveillance division has been out there supporting the former president's detail at some very high-profile events. They continue to provide that support, and they're out there providing support right now. So we're going to respond to the letter that we received, and we'll be sure to make that. I'm sure they will. We'll be able to share that response when the committee says it's okay to respond.
Is that a no, though? Did you cut funding personally?
I did not. No.
Did you finally figure out how he got that gun on the roof? Did it fit in the backpack?
We're working to determine that. That's something that the FBI is working on. There's a couple of, I don't want to speculate as to exactly how he would have gotten it up there.
Director Rowe, the 2024 campaign is heating up. Y'all are adding more and
So we have already trained numerous details to be able to mobilize, to pick up multiple candidates. Most of the presidential campaign activity usually picks up coming out of the conventions. So we are prepared for this. It's just that now we are in such a heightened dynamic environment. We're actually making sure that we are probably putting everything we can to make sure that we don't have a mission failure. It is incumbent upon everyone in the Secret Service. We all understand the gravity of this situation, and we are rising to meet this moment. And we are certainly, as we go into the Democratic National Convention, as we await picking up another candidate with the eventual naming of a vice presidential nominee from the Democratic side, we are going to staff that, and we're going to make sure that we have all the resources and assets necessary to provide that level of protection. Thank you, everyone.